Hi, my name is Sean Levine. Welcome to Wax and the Carrot. Today's carrot is Who Killed the Electric Car. It's a documentary by Chris Payne that was put out in 2006, and it's about the electric vehicle in California. And I'm going to spoil it for you. I'm going to totally make you're going to hate me, but I think this is news, and I don't think enough people saw this documentary, and you can see it if you go on Google Videos. You can watch the video for free. Okay. You can also go to their website. Just look up Who Killed the Electric Car, and I believe Sony has got a website for it which has FAQ and tells you a lot about that as well. But I'm going to spoil it for you anyway. I'm going to ruin it. Basically, the documentary is about electric vehicles in California. At some point, California realized, I guess in the 90s and the 80s, that smog was detrimental to the long-term survival of Californian citizens as they breathed it in and intended to reduce their life expectancy. So what they did is the California Air Resources Board passed a zero-emission vehicle mandate, ZEV, which said if you're going to sell cars in California, if you're going to come into my house, you're going to have to obey my rules. And part of those rules were zero-emission vehicles. A certain percentage of cars sold in California had to be zero emissions, and the mandate basically said by 2003 there had to be 10% vehicles sold in California that were zero-emission vehicles. And the car manufacturers responded. Specifically, they talk about in this one General Motors. Their electric vehicles extensively covered in here. But a lot of the other manufacturers, Honda, Toyota, Ford, Nissan, came out with electric vehicles as well. And why isn't California covered with electric vehicles now? Well, because the documentary, there was dark forces gathering in the night. Well, not really. But basically, the car companies realized that that they didn't want to make electric vehicles because electric vehicles tend to be more reliable, have less parts, don't require as much maintenance, and that affects the bottom line of the car companies. It was like eating their own foot because they already had a product line that had all this repair stuff attached to it called the combustion car. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's caught on quite a bit. And so the electric car kind of competed with their already existing product line, and it would make a lot less money for them. So they actively, they sued CARB to get rid of the mandate. They started grassroots movements. They messed around with the language of the ZEV so that they could destroy demand and therefore not produce the car. The oil companies were also good buddies with the car companies, but also had a vested interest in saying, if the electric car takes off, what happens to our oil? We've got 1 trillion barrels out there we need to sell you for trillions and trillions of dollars, and if you don't buy it, then what will I do with it? I can't fill my pool with oil, or I could, but I can't swim in it then. They also spent money and lobbied government, so what they do is you hire a PR firm to go out there and create some grassroots movements, get out there. Electricity should never be used in vehicles because this man cut me a check, is basically how those kind of grassroots movements go, but that's what they did too. And then the sad story is the electric vehicle, which was a very viable vehicle, they started rolling out onto California because of the ZEV mandate in 1995. But then back in 2001, 2002, all of the electric vehicles were taken back, even though people wanted to buy them, even though there were thousands of people on a waiting list who wanted to buy electric vehicles. And they crushed them, even though people wanted to buy them and were ready, at least in the case of General Motors, to pay like $1.9 million for 78 used vehicles. They weren't allowed to do that, and the vehicles were crushed. And the documentary, this is the major spoiling part, but they tried to say, who's guilty of killing the electric car? Like it's a murder mystery. So there's a list. There's a list. So they talk about, is it the consumers? Yes, the consumers. Basically, ignorance, not knowing about the product, not caring a lot about, I guess, the environment or keeping up to date with this technology or the mandates of the government. Ignorance meant there wasn't more clamoring for this vehicle to stay there. Batteries, is battery technology? They said no, they're not guilty. The battery technology was good enough. Oil companies, they're guilty. Yes, they actively tried to stop this vehicle from coming out, and they actually bought the battery technology from General Motors or whatever, basically just to shelve it. The car companies, yes, they were guilty. They produced the cars, but they didn't really want to continue producing the cars because it affected their bottom line and competed with their existing product line. Hydrogen fuel cells was kind of like the boondoggle thing thrown out there, and he says yes, they are guilty too of killing the electric car. You know, mainly because it's a boondoggle by the car companies. They get billions of dollars. Now we'll say hydrogen is the future, even though hydrogen is very low density. There's no, like, hydrogen might be the most abundant element in the universe, but in the form you need it to put it in your car, you don't have it. You have to manufacture it, right? So, and you have to create an infrastructure, and the cars cost $1 million each, and they have all kinds of problems, and the range problems, and everything. So kind of boondoggle switch from electric, which actually worked, to hydrogen. So hydrogen is kind of guilty. CARB, the California Air Resources Board, yes, the chairman made the changes. He didn't give fair time to the citizenry and the people using the electric cars. He gave most of the time in their hearings about the mandate changes and stuff like that to the car manufacturers. And he was also head chairman or something of the hydrogen program, so kind of conflict of interest between electric and hydrogen. And so, you know, CARB is guilty too. The government, yes, the government is guilty as well, he says in the documentary, because there are things called CAFE standards. You know, like the amount of foam you get on a mochaccino is tightly regulated. No, these are fuel efficiency standards set by the federal government. And so the federal government gave a legal brief to California, basically telling them, don't mess with fuel efficiency. Only we can destroy the environment. And so they were trying to say the electric vehicle was against the CAFE standards. Look up CAFE on Wikipedia. You'll know exactly what it is. It has very little to do with mochaccino foam content. Okay, so that's it. Documentary spoiled. But however, I will have to give you more details because this is just conclusions. I'll have to give you some proof, unlike a lot of other accusers and on the internet, I'm sure, or on TV or in newspapers. So in part 2, I will talk about the electric car and why it is a better vehicle choice for us, standard of living wise, as well as the environment and everything else, as compared to the combustion car. So stay tuned for part 2 or 4. I guess it's just 2. Hopefully I won't have to do 4 of these. Okay, bye-bye.